Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimbari, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching podcast. For my listeners who've been following, you know that recently we had on a guest talking about the Imagine program, which is a grief support center. And we were talking to their executive director, Lindsay Schambach, who was talking about channeling her own grief and helping schools to help their students, to help their teachers, to process grief and other traumatic events, not just death, but other things that don't go our way. How do we become resilient and overcome those things? In that episode, we spoke more so about supporting the individual and a little bit about supporting the community around the individual when unexpected or traumatic things happen. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by the two authors of a great new book called Navigating the Unexpected: What Schools as a System Should Be Doing When They Have an Unexpected Event. And that's where I think our conversation tonight is going to align very well with the conversation we just had. Tonight, we're going to be looking at those systems that schools should be putting in place. Joining tonight are Geri Parscale and Darcy Kraus, offering their insights as parents, as educators, as system leaders, what we all could be doing to prepare for the unexpected. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today.
John, thanks so much for having us.
Could you tell us a little bit about your backgrounds in education and what led you to write a book about navigating traumatic and unexpected events in school systems?
Sure, and I'll be happy to address that. I am a lifelong educator. I have been in education for about 38 years now. I've been a teacher, principal, deputy superintendent. And then in 2016, my youngest son, Nicholas, was diagnosed with a pineoblastoma. And that, for those of us who are non-medical folks, is a brain tumor. In his case, that was inoperable, and he was going into his fourth grade year at Sunset Hill, which is where Darcy was the principal. And for the next few years, we, as partners, were navigating this unexpected crisis in Nicholas's life. And so I'm going to turn it over to Darcy, and I'm going to tell you, or have her tell you a little bit about it from her standpoint.
I too am a lifelong educator, starting out as a teacher and had the privilege of lots of different roles. I was a principal and retired as an elementary director, and now I also do educational consulting work. But during the time in the life that I had the honor of being Nicholas's principal and Geri's friend, we did meet with an unexpected challenge. And this book is a culmination of so many conversations that Geri and I have had. Hindsight's always 20/20. And I had an incredible staff at my school, and we worked really hard to get it right the first time. There's always things you can do better. And understanding, when I started searching and researching for things that would help me navigate this unexpected event, there wasn't anything out there that would be a framework that I could follow and yet customize. And so that's what we set out and I believe to do, and I believe we have accomplished.
Yeah, John, I think we both, Darcy and I, and you had mentioned you consult as well. Researching this book, we now know that 2/3 of our students worldwide are now reporting that they have been a victim of a traumatic event or a crisis event by the time they turn the age of 16. I think what schools do really well are things like crisis drills, fire drills, tornado drills, intruder on campus drills, because they're a system. It is a systematic approach and it's practiced, and everybody knows the next step in the system. But when you have a traumatic event, you don't plan for that. We certainly didn't expect in July of 2016 to learn that my son had a life-threatening disease. And so we wanted to be able to put together a comprehensive playbook, if you will, to be able to say whether you have a system in place or not, this book is for you. And if I may, I'm just going to read a few because, you know, one of the things that I was asked by a colleague as I traveled is, but what are you talking about when you say crisis or trauma? And we address this in the book head on and say, you know, we're good. We don't need anything like that. Nothing bad ever happens here. Insert whatever. And if I may just read a couple of the varied things that we came up with and we heard from practicing educators. A beloved third grade teacher who works in your school was in a car accident. As a result, she's in a coma, and she has a 7th grade daughter who attends another school within your district. A 4th grade student who has recently entered your school has a family member in the military, and they're going to be deployed for 16 months. A family with 3 traumatized children fleeing from a war-torn country enrolls in your school. Or along that same vein, a family of students has recently enrolled in your school due to being displaced by a weather-related catastrophe in another state. And we go on. And when we heard that statistic, the 2/3 statistic, I think both of us realized why we're seeing so much need for, we're seeing behavioral needs, social emotional needs, and physical needs on top of the academic needs that we work with on a daily basis as teachers. And we needed something. All of our feeds are full of teachers, hardworking, dedicated professionals who are just trying to say, but what do I do? What do we do as a school? And that's, I think, what we came up with.
Yeah, even just backtracking just a moment before we then talk about some of the ways that schools can plan. You had mentioned, Gary, what do you think is the reason why we're having, it seems, this uptick in students feeling stress and being exposed to traumatic events?
I think it's the ever-changing world. We can blame a lot on the pandemic. And I'm not going to say that I know things all pandemic, but I think that, or all things pandemic, I think that each of us had our own individual experiences. But I think that maybe is a key word, individual. We did not have that community to share. But what I think it's awareness also. It is being able to understand that we can't solve the problem or the crisis. In other words, we couldn't cure
Mm,
Nicholas's cancer. That was never something, I mean, and as hard as that was, we couldn't do that. But I think it was the realization of realizing that there has to be a better way than we refer to it as the casserole effect in the book, because we when there's a crisis, you just flock to that family and you bring over a casserole and a 2-liter bottle of Diet Coke, and so does everybody else. And so we knew that there had to be a way to focus in on those 4 areas that I'd mentioned earlier, but to do it through, again, through a system.
exactly. And you pretty much answered the question I was going to ask, which is, why should we all care about this? You laid it out there. You know, life happens, and every community is going to face something unexpected. Every individual in a community is going to face something unexpected. To your point about the casserole effect and everyone coming and embracing somebody experiencing trauma, but doing it all at the same time, all together. I think I had heard Darcy speaking in another podcast talking about a system being really or needing to be a prolonged system. I think the words she used were onset to conclusion, because everyone does grieve with the person grieving at the same time, but then we have a tendency to move on, and then that person is still more or less left there feeling what they're feeling. What are some of the systems you would recommend for schools facing these unexpected events? And how are those systems designed for onset of the situation through to conclusion, if it ever does?
One thing I did want to tag on to Geri's response was that as an administrator, all of us, we recognize that even though one family, one student may be in crisis right then, we have 500 other families that we need to be cognizant of. And the lens of equitable practice really comes into play, making sure that one student's crisis is treated as equitably as possible, although customized, right, to meet their needs, as the others. So that, to use our casserole analogy, we try to be as light as we possibly can with a very difficult topic. One group doesn't get 2 casseroles and the others 22, especially year to year, and timing and all of those things. So from onset to conclusion, the steps are actually the same. It would just be the duration with each step that would probably vary. We talk about a dynamic problem-solving team, understanding that Geri and I can be rural Kansas girls, and yet you live outside of Manhattan, right? And so this book addresses the differing resources that are available to schools, be it urban or rural. So we understand that you may not have the personnel to create a dynamic problem-solving team, but you can use your BLT. So those are the types of accommodations that we discuss in the book. So getting our folks trained about trauma, about how we handle things, talking about a liaison that we utilize that can speak for the family, so that we are from the very beginning putting the student at the center, then the family, then the community. We call it our 360-degree view. And that we immediately form a partnership so that the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, and more importantly, the right hand is not doing something that the left hand doesn't want done. And that's huge, especially when families are in crisis and trauma. Then we lean into what educators know, right? Which is the instructional cycle. And we talk about how we layer that on to the 4 different focus groups, or the 4 different focus areas that Geri spoke of earlier. And that was probably our aha moment, was when we came up with the 4-square template, because I'm going to let Geri talk about the needs of Nicholas shifting, but this allows busy educators to communicate in a ubiquitous manner with all staff that have hands-on with the kiddos throughout the day, so that no balls get dropped. Geri, I'm going to let you take it home from there.
I will. And I remember very clearly when we were working on this and we had the aha of the 4-square template. We take our lead, the inspiration, of course, was from the struggles that my son went through. And we look at behavioral, social, emotional, physical, and academic. And Nicholas was receiving chemotherapy, a very aggressive form of chemotherapy, 5 days a week, as well as radiation for an extended period of time. When he was able to go to school, there were times when academics just wasn't the priority. It was hard for me as an educator and a mom to think, but he's got to learn his multiplication facts, when really what we needed to be able to do was focus in on, and I'll just use physical because he would sit in class and either not feel well or feel really good if he had gotten an infusion the day before. In our template, we have a system set up that, and Darcy had mentioned it, that one individual kind of being the go-to person. It can be anyone, but in our case, it would have been Darcy. And there were times when Nicholas he would go to school, but he had had a rough night. And I needed to relay that to Darcy so that she could get the message to those educators who were working with him. By this time, he was in 5th grade. And I know what Darcy did. She would hang up the phone with me, run down to tell, the 5th grade teachers, but in between, she stopped 4 different times and either doesn't get down there or gets down there too late. The 4 square template that we developed is so much needed, because then that point person can put a color coding on it as to what we're going to focus in on today, which interventions are going to be brought up today because of whatever the individual student has dealt with the night before. One of the things that we references in the book is a kindergartner who is exhibiting extreme behavior. And that's a lot of what we see right now are those behavioral needs. If we have communication from the parent or the home and being able then to tailor that on a dime and switch that to what he or she needs immediately, how much frustration is just melted away, not only obviously from the child, but from the educators, from the home, etc. And it's just, again, like Darcy said, not plug and play, but yes, it is, because we tailored it to meet school's needs if you have 100 students in your entire school, or if you have 900 students.
So now, Geri, Darcy, how would you handle a situation? Because I could really, and I'm sure there is applicability in what I'm about to ask, I could really see the 4 square template protocol really helping a response team, because I'm assuming this is owned by the response team, yes?
Yes, they are the ones that basically craft it because they've been trained. And they have the protocols. There's different layers, obviously, of training that goes into this. But even our custodian, our kitchen workers, our wonderful paras, everyone in our elementary building interacted with Nicholas. And so having that information, for example, with Nicholas, if we could have just sent out a red on the academics, that would have let everyone know we are not demanding, we are not cajoling, we're not even supporting academics today. We are only focused on the quadrants that are in green, and that's social, emotional, and physical. That's our areas of emphasis that day. It alleviates some of that compelling guilt, if you will, for the teachers to try and keep him going in certain areas that as a team and with the family liaison, we've decided that's a no-go today. And then again, getting it out in a ubiquitous manner, cognizant of confidentiality. It's only a need to know, but yet everybody knows. And that's where I found, as a building principal, I had every good intention to touch the 18 people that I knew were going to touch Nicholas that day. But what ended up happening was telephone, please tell them, please tell them, please tell them. And that's not a system.
Right.
That's not a system. And in the book, that's actually how it's structured, is we, again, try and add a little levity at the beginning of each chapter. That's kind of my internal dialogue to myself as I'm going through these different aspects. And then the rest of the chapter is kind of like, okay, hop on the lily pads where we fell in the pond and do it this way.
You had mentioned the owning of the plan. Just like Darcy said, it is the dynamic problem solving team that creates the plan. And through the book, we detail this is the data dig, if you will, is learning about the situation, finding out everything that we can, and then crafting that plan, but making sure that the stakeholders are informed and, like Darcy said, that are trained in this, and of course knowledgeable of when things happen, when things shift, etc. One of the things that I think we go through as well is we talk about the importance of communication, the right communication. We talk about the difference between the paintball approach, which is throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks, and the paint by number approach, and being able to, for that individual student or that class or that group of kids, tailoring it based on data and knowing the right move at the right time.
I can definitely see the four square model assisting, as you were saying, a class, a school, an individual family in a situation such that Nicholas faced. I'm wondering, how would you use that protocol, that four square protocol, if it was, say, a situation that affected that directly, I mean, because Nicholas's situation affected everyone he encountered.
Right.
What could a school do if it faces a situation where certain students and families, multiple students and multiple families are affected at once, and that it has this dramatic effect across the whole community, and also a situation where truly there was no warning it was happening?
I'm thinking we live in Kansas. It's tornado season. Tornado goes through a town and everything is devastated. The four square model, put that aside right now. All of the steps leading up to it, the communication template talks about aligning talking points that are specific to various stakeholder groups, because we have different stakeholder groups that need different amounts of information, be it your staff, be it your parents, be it your school community, be it the classroom that's impacted, that type of thing. And so as a dynamic problem solving team, aligning with, in this case, it may be first responder is a liaison you're working with, and you coordinate those talking points. And then as a DPST, you decide, and it's a very streamlined document. Okay, points 1, 4, and 8, we're going to tell these people. 2, 6, and 7. And it even goes so far as it's going by email, it's going in person, it's going face to face, those types of things that in the moment, canvas of chaos. That's what you feel like. So getting that blueprint of what the picture's supposed to look like, that's what that communication template does. Then all the other steps, I would see it being processed in the same manner, just on a grander scale. Again, we did it more for the individual student.
Of course.
John, then to go off what Darcy was saying, I think that, okay, it happened, right? Whether it's a shooting, whether it's a tornado, whether it's a crisis event in the town. And then again, there might be a little bit of that chaos initially, but it's our jobs as leaders then to bring that back. That's why we think that it's so important for all schools to have the book, because you don't plan for this. But if you have a team in place and understand the components, those protocols that we suggest, or to augment the protocols that you already have, then going from that 50,000 foot view, bringing it down to those 4 areas, the behavior, the social, emotional, the physical, and the academic, and then say maybe through their professional learning communities, collaboration time is being able to say, okay, we have this menu, and it's almost, again, that data dig of which students need which interventions within that grade level or subject area. going through and looking at the whole spectrum, but then bringing that back down, and the responsibility of the teachers as the leaders of their students being able to assess where it is they're at, where their students are, what it is they need, and then that menu. You're still working within a system, and having that predetermined system, the pieces that, again, you can have in place, or using what you already have to augment, then when that a situation happens, you're ready. You don't have to figure out the getting people together and the all of that. You have a plan.
Exactly. In writing this book, or even in your own consulting work, have you worked with other schools that have implemented your suggestions? And what have been some of the successes?
Not enough. I'm just gonna say up front, right?
Well, Geri, I hope people listening to this take the bite and reach out to you. And we're going
Yes,
to talk
that-
about where they can
That
find
would be awesome. It's interesting because I have a colleague in another state. Her family is going through a crisis, and she has reached out to the schools, plural, that have her students, and they are looking at implementing this because she recognizes, she's an educator, but she recognizes the need for her own family. And so she's advocating for her children's schools, plural, not just for her kids, because actually they're kind of on the back end of a trauma. I appreciated that because she was looking through the parent lens as well as the educator lens. And I must say, I was lucky enough to have Darcy in that situation. It just so happened that she was one of the first calls I made after we learned of the diagnosis, because it just so happens that she and I had a meeting on the books for the following week just to talk about the next school year and Nicholas's needs and, those. And we, of course, knew each other and were casual friends, but it just so happens that she was one of the calls I had to make. And she details that in the book. And it was a time that I kind of remember it, but I don't. And so Darcy's an awfully special person to take that up. So I'm very blessed. Anyway, go ahead, Darcy.
I laugh because I think Geri and I, through the process of this, have been able, as we have written the book, to share those bits and pieces. As I spoke to at the beginning, each one is a standalone component, but as a framework, it becomes a comprehensive system. And so I have been able to drop little nuggets into the work that I do. I remember getting a call one night, and Geri was, I believe, somewhere on the West Coast, and her saying, "Hey, I know we don't have this finalized yet, but this school really needs it. Can I just grab some?" And I'm like, "You go, girl. We'll call it action research." Both of us have peppered this into what we do because it's become so much of who we are, and we see the need all the time. As I stated, one of my rationales for doing it, other than I love Nicholas and I love Geri, was there was nothing out there for me when I needed it. Hindsight being 2020, we're about 8 years removed now. And so we've been able to build in these structures that we think will benefit so many people. And Geri and I, we get calls all the time from people that are associated with us that call and say, "This is happening," especially before the book was out. "What, we know you're writing that book. What do we do now?" And we are able to walk schools and soups and building principles through those steps. I don't know if we'll ever go and present at a conference. Yes, we feel so passionate about the fact that we think what we've developed is really good. It can be so impactful. It has that equitable lens, and we want others to benefit where we were flailing in the dark.
And that's the other thing. We haven't really talked about this. Having these systems in place allows us as educators, as leaders, to do really what we need to be doing, at least as leaders in the 21st century, which is supporting the social emotional needs of our communities. And if we're scattered, because let's face it, we're humans as well, and we have our own emotions. And if we're off kilter, how are we going to support others when they're off kilter? Having these systems in place, it might not be the thing we want to think about. Surely we don't want to think about it. We don't want it to happen to us, but it often does, or it does in different ways.
Well, John, and if I may, recognizing that it will, I hope it's not a cancer diagnosis, or I hope it's not a death. Darcy and I consult every day, and there is not a week that goes by that we don't call each other or text each other and say, got another one.
I do think as a principal, we've all been there where we do our perfunctory, everybody exits and we show our green card that, it's our fire drill and we check it off and the fire marshal checks it out. And chances are you're not going to run into too many kids whose school has caught on fire. But we practice it every month and we have a system for it. This is something I bet the bank on that every administrator is going to have at least once a year, if not more. And so investing in it up front so that you can meet your school community with a feeling of calm and we got you. Structured expertise to me is invaluable.
John, I was talking, someone not in education and I were having a conversation the other day. Again, it's that startling statistic of how many kids are actually going through a crisis. And you could tell she had you could just see the questions going in her head. And she paused and then she said, oh my gosh. She said, my son was in a class of another child who was injured at the Chiefs parade shooting. If there's anything I think as a parent, as an educator that I learned from, he taught us so much. I think it was just that it's going to happen. So let's be ready for it.
Ladies, is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you really want the listeners to know about responding to the unexpected and traumatic events?
We really haven't touched a lot on it. We do in our book is just being trauma informed. And that goes for all educators. We have some professional responsibilities in our life. And that's one of those things, whether it is through our book, and of course we want that, but because we do talk about a lot of resources that are out there to just be trauma informed, that and the communication piece, I think, are very, very important to this system.
And all of the templates that we've referenced are all of the components of the framework. The resources and the templates are ready and available. Again, not a plug and play because there's work involved, obviously. And I think the one item that was an aha for me is we always hear, and there's truth to it, that educators just continually get more and more on their plate. But as we state in the book, these types of situations are going to consume your time anyway. There's just no way around it. As a professional educator, I would rather have things in place so that I know that my time and that of my staff is well spent and done in an expert structured manner so that, as you said, we can focus on what we need to, and that's people. And we want to do the best that we can.
Yeah, most definitely. Agreed.
So now, ladies, where can people find out more about you, the work you do? Where can they invite you to go speak?
First of all, the book is available at both solutiontree.com as well as amazon.com. Email us. You can reach out through social media platforms. One of the things that we want to be able to do is to work with schools, to work with teams of teachers, schools, and districts to be able to do that preparedness. I feel that we are experts on the subject because we lived it. Reach out. We want to help any way we can.
Darcy, want to add anything?
I would just say there's no wrong time to pick up the book. We encourage you to do it ahead of time in a proactive manner where you can walk through it and really think through it. But we also live in reality, and our ultimate goal is to help schools. And my personal passion is to help principals. So if you get into a crisis and you need the cliff notes, call us.
Thank you both for your time today. This has been very informative, and I enjoy talking with you through a difficult topic. So thank you very much, and thank you for your openness.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.